What's happening, League fans, and welcome to a very special playoff edition of The Blame Game. I'm Mark Z, and since the quarterfinals wrapped up this weekend, we'll be looking at the post-series discussion threads and discussing if the blame there is justified or not. Now, before I get into it, I want to pat myself on the back pretty quickly here because I ended up predicting both series correctly. Now, I was a little off because both series ended one game earlier than I said, but I mean, come on, that's pretty good overall. I'll kick things off with the blame game first and talk about somebody who actually had nothing to do with the games this weekend. I'm talking about Thorin, and normally I wouldn't mention anyone not related to the games, but because he was the most blamed individual in the thread, as well as having multiple people specifically ask me to comment on it, I guess I will. I'm not one to start drama, evidenced by the fact that I'm still a nobody in the scene despite being here for 3 years, but I've let fans down in previous videos from not covering the most controversial topic for the week, so I'll indulge them this time. I want to preface this by saying that even if you go 0-4 in your predictions, that's fine. Upsets happen, predictions are hard to get right, and as long as the reasoning behind that prediction was sound, that's all that matters. Unfortunately for Thorin, not only did he incorrectly predict NRG to beat TL, but the reasoning behind it was not very good. His analysis can best be described as narratively driven, talking about players' past glories, playoff experience, and the rookie syndrome, as opposed to actual in-game topics like how they're performing this season, what champs are they playing, how do they 2v1, their draft, etc. It's fine to use narrative topics as contextual or supplemental information, but if it's the foundation of your evaluation, it's just going to come out bad. It makes sense that this was his approach as well, because he himself admits that he wants to be a facilitator in discussions while having experts on his shows. He's an esports historian with a hilarious personality, and he's amazing at that kind of content. However, when you compare his video and someone who covers multiple games in different regions with someone's video who was the longest tenured coach in the West, I believe, and one of the few coaches who quit but wasn't fired, you can really see the difference between the two videos. He doesn't have the time or experience to accurately break down pro play, and that's why Reddit's blame is on the mark. For an actual breakdown on the series, the last video basically already covered it. Impact won top lane, but it didn't matter. GBM had some nice plays, but Phoenix mostly neutralized him and even solo killed him in game 3. And Dardoch, Piglet, and Matt are so much better than their counterparts that they just crushed them in lane and over the course of the games. Let's move over to the other series from this weekend in C9 versus TSM. C9 were upset by a fresh-looking TSM, and Rush pulled a lot of blame for tilting in the series. Now, I've seen Rush tilt in scrims, and most of these games look nothing like that, so I'm not sure it's fair to call it tilting, but the question is, were these losses his fault or not? When you look at how these two teams stack up in terms of play styles, players, champions, etc., Rush is really the only advantage that C9 has in the early game over TSM. This lead was minimized by having 3 lane swaps, and they weren't really the standard ones either because TSM went to match lanes frequently after the first turret drop. It's just a little bit harder to shine as a jungler in 2v1s as opposed to standard lanes. Despite this, Rush was actually involved in kills pre-10 minutes in 3 out of the 4 games. Unfortunately, he also died pre-10 minutes in 3 out of the 4 games. He always had a couple of nice plays, but then would switch between smarts and dumbs and start getting caught out of position. As C9 transitioned into mid-game with minor leads at best, they were picked apart by a TSM that were firing on all cylinders. It's true that Rush didn't really outperform his jungle counterpart Sven, which is what a lot of us were expecting to happen, so I think he deserves a little bit of blame, but not enough to call it tilting or losing the series by himself. One topic I think might deserve more blame than it's getting is the C9 staff. Now, it's very hard to attribute draft problems to a single person because it really is a team decision. Having said that, I think C9 should have gotten off Kindred and taken the Graves or Gragas when they had the opportunities to. Their bans were also pretty low impact as they often seem to hurt their own champ pools as much as TSM's. It seemed like they flip-flopped between underreacting and overreacting to what TSM was doing in the draft. Another thing, and maybe this is just a pet peeve of mine, but I always hated when people who didn't need to be present for strategy talks were there. I don't know C9's culture, and this might be totally off base, but I don't know why StrifeCrow, a Hearthstone pro, Meteos, who doesn't interact with the team strategically from my understanding, and a host of other people were not only present, but joking around during the between-match discussions. It seems like this can only be a distraction, and it was something that I was actively, and kind of annoyingly so, against as a coach. That's it for the playoff quarterfinal episode of The Blame Game. I'd like to extend TSM a high five for helping us avoid Immortals in the next round. CLG is still a difficult opponent, so TL will need to be on point, but I expect they prefer that over Immortals. You can follow my Twitter here, which I would appreciate, and you can expect some drunken playoff predictions. I'll catch you guys next week. Remember to subscribe to the channel and also throw my Twitter that follow. There's a decent chance I catch some flame for this episode, and I'm looking forward to that, so the link's in the description below.